Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Vogler. I'm the author of The Writer's Journey, Mythic Structure for Writers. And I'm speaking to you at an extraordinary time. Just to peg this on the calendar, I'm speaking to you from mid-April of 2020 when we're involved in a worldwide crisis, epidemic. And this is an occasion for me to take a second look at something I've lived with for many years, which is the hero's journey pattern, which is a deep psychological pattern in psychology and in mythology and in the movies. And I've always used it as a handy Swiss Army knife for analyzing story problems and making movies more entertaining and more psychologically accurate. And it's also come in handy many times as a little guideline compass for the difficulties of life and the passages that we all have to go through. But I'm seeing it all over again in this situation as what it was really designed for. This is an orientation device for us that was passed down by our ancestors and embedded and almost kind of hidden in the stories and myths, but it's there for us to use. And I think it has renewed value in these times and might help you a little bit to get some orientation for where you're at. And also it's a predictive device, and it does give some hints about where we might be going and what to look out for. So first of all, this whole concept is derived from the work of Joseph Campbell, who wrote in The Hero with a Thousand Faces about this ancient pattern. And he said that most stories take place in two different worlds: an ordinary world that the hero, be it an individual hero or a collective hero of a whole tribe or family or society, those heroes know that ordinary world very well. They may be a little uncomfortable in it, but they know how it works. And then the story will push the heroes into some special world where transformation takes place, where there's a lot of danger and disturbance, but out of that comes a positive new orientation. So the first stage of my 12 is the ordinary world, as Campbell calls it, where, again, everyone sort of knows what the deal is, and the heroes may have a little bit of unease, but they've been getting along, and they have some coping mechanisms, and they have managed so far. But then stage two happens, and suddenly everything's going to be different. And there's a big, maybe crash on the soundtrack that announces, on the soundtrack of our lives in this case, announces that something's happened and we're all going to have to react to it. So the ordinary world for all of us was how it was before this crisis came to our doorstep. And that is rapidly disappearing into the rearview mirror behind us. And we know that life is going to be somehow different. We may get back to some kind of normal, but it's going to be a different normal. So the call to adventure has come to us, and it's kind of shocking, as it is to heroes and stories sometimes. And it leads to the third stage, which is refusal of the call, because it's natural and typical of heroes that they're reluctant and resistant to this call at first out of fear. So I think we all went through that in this crisis. When that first big bang on the soundtrack of our lives came, we all sort of crouched down into a defensive posture and froze up for a while and didn't know what to do, where to turn, who to listen to, what does it mean, and so forth. And so we went down into our lowest chakras. If you think about this chakra system of imaginary centers up and down the spine that control different aspects of our spiritual being. The lower ones have to do with survival and power, things of sex, things like that. But everybody dropped down universally to this lowest level, the root chakra it's called, that has to do with eating and having shelter and firm base under you and things that you trust and rely on. Everybody dropped down to these low chakras that have to do with the lowest part of the body, down at the base of the spine. And this helps explain why everybody went crazy for toilet paper, because their minds sort of dropped away from the higher things of the heart and the spirit and so forth and went down to, oh my God, I'll not have enough of all I need to survive, food and especially toilet paper. So the next thing up is a natural stage again of dealing with this fear by seeking experts and wise counsel, both inside yourself, your own intuition, your own experience, but also outward, looking for good mentors, experts, because this stage is stage 4, the meeting with the mentor. And here we're trying to sort out who is trustworthy or not, who has good information. And for our current situation, this has to do with listening to and seeking out the best medical advice and the best leadership, and figuring out who can we trust and who is not to be trusted. And this is kind of moving before our eyes and changing all the time. So after this phase, we get some reassurance. The mentors are supposed to give us gifts, and in this situation, currently, they are giving us advice and actual rituals, just like the old shamans used to do, rituals and some taboos, and telling us how to wash our hands ritually and to wear masks and all these other things which have odd echoes with the old days when the shamans would deal with crises by seeking their sources of inspiration and wisdom and then giving us some routines to do that would help fix the situation. So next stage up is crossing the threshold, which separates the two worlds, the ordinary world and the special world. And here the hero crosses over, or the collective hero, all of us in this case, crosses over into this new world. Now, everybody's moving in this at different speeds, and some people have gone all the way through the adventure and have either gotten the disease and have recovered or have died. And some people are moving ahead more quickly than others in understanding what this is all about. But I think most of us are still stuck at this threshold, realizing, okay, everything's got to change, but we don't really know the shape of it and how we're going to live as we go forward. So crossing the threshold is a big step of commitment. And in movies, it's represented by leaping over a chasm or crossing a bridge or going up a set of stairs or down into a cave. Or launching a rocket or something like that that indicates we're leaving the ordinary world and going to this special world. And there you reach stage 6, which I call tests, allies, and enemies, because here, first of all, you're tested in small ways as you learn the ropes of this new world. And these are typically not fatal tests. They're not going to kill you, although in this case they are pretty drastic. We have to be very conscious of all our hygiene practices and touching and physical distancing and so forth. And those tests, in this case, can kill you. You know, the hero's journey, always a metaphor to me, now is not that anymore. And, you know, going to the grocery store is a real hero's journey into a special world. So there you are tested, but also you encounter different forces, which some are allied with you and some are against you, or they obstruct you. And here I'm thinking about the social connections that everyone is trying to make. Since we're physically distanced, let's connect and let's make new tribes and new groups of common interest and try to figure things out together. And then at the same time, you find out who your enemies are and who is maybe going off on the wrong track, making something out of it that it's not really, exaggerating it, making conspiracy theories, using it to advance particular interests of theirs without thinking about the common good. So the next stage, 7, is a long phase, and I think this is something we have to set ourselves for. There's going to be a period of time where we're not quite at that peak that keeps showing up in the diagrams, where we go from some small indication, a few cases and so forth, and then it goes up this ramp very rapidly, and that's the phase I'm talking about now, the approach to that peak that they're trying to flatten. And in this stage, the characteristic thing in movies is that you will learn more about yourself and about the other members of your team and about the enemy. And so here the scales fall from your eyes, and your first impressions may be blown away by what you learn from experience in this tense, difficult situation. So you will find the other people on the team, maybe you made some judgments about them or first impressions about them, and you realize as you get to know them better, those impressions were wrong, and they have qualities, some good, some bad, that are not what you first judged. And about yourself, you may find you have qualities and abilities that you didn't realize, and maybe some downsides too that you need to address. But a lot of light is being shined on everybody's character at this point, and that's how it is in movies as in our situation now. So the next stage, 8, is the ordeal, or as Campbell calls it, the supreme ordeal. And this is the sort of mainspring of the whole thing. And in movies, it's some kind of life and death moment, or even better, death and rebirth moment, because typically the hero will appear to die, or there'll be a lot of death all around the hero and a lot of danger. And that's the peak of this diagram that they keep drawing for us. So we want to avoid that very dramatic thing that you find in movies of let's make the peak as high and tense as we can. We're trying to bring it down and flatten it so it's not dramatic. But this is the most dramatic moment in the middle of most stories, where you face some dragon, you face your own fears, your greatest fears, in this case, fear of getting this illness and maybe dying of it, or losing people that you love, or the world changing so much you can't really adjust. So this brings about transformation. If the hero faces that greatest fear and survives, if a collective hero of a nation faces something like this, they come out of it stronger and maybe have greater powers. And this leads us to the next stage, 9, which is the reward. So there is some payoff for having faced death and survived that high point of the curve. And in movies, often there'll be celebration at this point, maybe love scenes, maybe a campfire scene where we sit around the fire and talk about what we learned by going through that dangerous thing in the last section. And so often in movies, there'll be a sense of illumination. They'll light cigarettes, there'll be a fire, they'll light candles. The nighttime scenes often have open flames in them. And this indicates that there's some illumination that goes along with facing your greatest fears. And so I look for that in this. I think that there will be some awakening, and it's already happening, with the stress of going through this universal, worldwide situation. There's a danger warning here, though. There's a hazard, which is that you will get a big head. You'll get ego inflation because you faced death and you survived. And this is what we are concerned about here. The medical experts are very concerned that we'll get over the first peak and begin to kick back and celebrate and go back to our normal world, try to rush back to the ordinary world right now as soon as we can. And that's dangerous because there's at least one more of these peaks ahead, and there may be several. And so don't let down your guard is the advice that's being given here. So the heroes celebrate, yes. They got through one of these difficult passages, but there may be more ahead, so don't relax your guard. But learn what you can from that experience and apply it for the next one. So the next stage is a kind of a turning, stage 10, which I call the road back. And the idea here is it's time to turn back and start moving towards resumption of ordinary patterns, our ordinary world. And in movies, often this indicates a big change of energy where there's a kind of a rush or acceleration. There are many chase scenes in movies at this stage. If you looked at 100 Hollywood movies, 75 or 80 of them have chase scenes at this point. And it's, I think in our current situation, the idea that some will be rushing to get back to normal, Also, things having calmed down a little bit will suddenly pick up again, and there'll be many more cases or a lot more activity around it. And so it's, again, a danger and a warning within this system. So if you get through that and pick up the pace a little bit to get through to the finish, the next to last stage, 11, is what I call the resurrection. And this is a busy time when a lot is going on, but it restages the death and rebirth experience that I described on stage 8, because here you go through it again. And it's the second peak in that curve that is described by Dr. Fauci and the other medical experts. And there may be more, but at least one more. And in movies, typically, in myths and stories, it's higher and more dramatic than the first one. And that may be the case here, something that we have to prepare for. So it has many characteristics, this part of the story just before the end. It brings everything together on all the levels. It will affect everything, every part of us, physically, mentally, spiritually. It is a kind of showdown or final battle with the dragon or the difficulty you're facing. It's a purification where all of your baloney and false ideas about yourself and others are blown away. It's a catharsis where you're shaken to your core, and out of that, maybe explosively, comes a whole new way to live. And it's the climax of most movies, and it will be the climax of this experience we're all going through. And then finally, stage 12 is, back to Campbell's language, the return with the elixir. And elixir, interestingly, is a word from Arabic that means a magic potion or a powder that heals all wounds and cures all ills. It's a panacea, which is an all-purpose healing device or medicine, and it's the counteractive to the pandemic. So pandemic and panacea are two sides of this. And it's the vaccines that we're all hoping that they find. The elixir in this case, on one side, is all the medical procedures and the ways of dealing with it and the hygiene and all the other practices and good things that we're trying to apply to keep the death rate down and bring society back to its old patterns. So the other side of this is that there will be an elixir that comes out of it, as it does out of any big human event like this, which is more self-awareness, more consciousness, a better world. And this is what a lot of us are hoping for in this, that although it's drastic and it's disturbed our world greatly, it will lead to something maybe a little bit better and healthier. Healthier for the planet, healthier for us. Better able to resist something like this next time it inevitably comes around again. So this is the Hero's Journey Circle, a quick revisit of this thing and a way of looking at it. This is like a lens that you can apply to many human situations, but it really seems to be here for us in this situation to guide us and act like a guidance system and a compass that gives us some idea of our values in it, and can lead us through, I think, as an age-old thing that's been preserved by our ancestors exactly for times like this. So I wish you the best, and I'll just give you 3 little words to wind up here. One, all beginning with the letter A. One is accept that you are in a worldwide situation and everybody's in it and it's inescapable. Second thing is adapt, which human beings always do in situations like this. And the third is aspire. Try to make something good and positive and wonderful out of it. So I wish you all the best with this, and I hope you're safe and healthy, and I hope that this has given you some comfort and orientation and just a little bit of hope in the situation that we're all facing.